Alright, first official video. Let's start things off simple. So, school. It's a thing and I'm pretty sure that's common knowledge, but high school? Man, that's basically impossible to describe. If I were to try and put the average experience into words, I'd have to call it odd. I won't joke around with you and say that every day at high school was an epic gladiator fight of dramatic drama. To be honest, based on my experience, high school was mostly just a time my friends and I would live day to day, with the craziness being more like highlights rather than the norm. Of course, that doesn't mean the weird moments were in any way not weird. The earliest thing from high school that I fondly remember happened all the way back in my freshman year. So, because I was a massive science nerd back in middle school, I actually took my earth science classes with the 10th graders who were a full year older than me at the time. Overall, the course wasn't too eventful. I did my work and got good grades, but every so often there'd be a sophomore assembly and everyone in the class would go to that instead of the lesson. Everyone except that nerdy 9th grader who'd get the class all to himself, sometimes for 2 periods. Those days were awesome. I'd basically get a free period to do whatever I wanted. Most of those times were pretty average in the way of how things played out. I'd mostly just finish all of the lab work early, so I could have more free time while everyone else had to work, and I doodled in my binder. But there was this one time I got really bored, and somehow made a desk lamp out of a stray observation light, a beaker clasp, and a whole mess of paper towels. Obviously, it looked jury-rigged as heck, but it was precious to me and it confused all of the other kids in class there, so I loved it. But beyond that, there was really only one other thing from that class that stood out that much to me. You see, roughly once a week or so, one of my sisters and her friends, who were at the time seniors, would walk by the class on their way out of school for senior privileges. Whenever that happened, I had this moment of sibling clarity, where I knew just what I had to do. I'd look at the teacher, who at that point mostly responded with a simple agreement, having known my plan from the times I've done it before. And assuming that I had a light workload. And I'd be free to bolt out the door. And every time I got this chance, I would sneak around the halls, always one turn behind my sister and her friends, and when they least expected it, I'd hover right behind them and wait a few seconds before loudly saying, "What you doing?" By the way, it's probably worth noting that I was always the good kid around school. I just took any chance to mess with my sister that I could get. And it would always give them such a shock every time that it happened. But it was all good humor, just so you know, and we always did have a good laugh after the fact. But yeah, overall I'd have to say that being in that class was pretty sweet. Well, except for those days when there was a 9th grade assembly and the class wouldn't be cancelled because of one absence. So I'd end up stuck with an even bigger pile of work to do, so I'd be caught up. But it was still a net positive, I guess. Now, this is only one of the things that happened to me while I was in high school. I actually did have lots of other things happen to me during the time. For example, there was the time I helped build a motorized guillotine for my robotics club that hated me. Or the time I tried sacrificing my friend. And the school band trips. And yeah, I know that earlier I said for the most part high school can be a bit of an uneventful time, but when you look back at it, all those years weren't just a time when everyone simply did their homework and moved on. It was a time where we did things we normally wouldn't have. A time where we could be as social or antisocial as we wanted, but most importantly, it was a time where we could make mistakes, just doing crazy, comical, or even just a few odd things that we mostly saw as a casual day at the time. But even for someone like me, whom I'd consider to be quite tame and not that social at all during those days, those times are probably some of my most fond memories. I said it before, high school was a time where my friends and I used to live day to day, and for the most part, that time was in fact average. But if you look hard enough at the things you'd consider normal or background noise, you can see that the things that you've done back then in your life are probably more noteworthy than you thought. Well, that should about wrap things up. I really hope you enjoyed my first official video here. I guess about now would be the time where I should tell you a lot about the obligatory like and subscribe buttons that seem so vital here. Okay, bye.